Hello, welcome to ABC50's Veterans Voices, honoring those who serve. I'm Isabella Colello. It's no doubt that the North Country has a very special connection to the military. It's home to tens of thousands of soldiers and their families who are stationed at Fort Drum. But there are just as many veterans.
So in 2021, Jefferson County became, per capita, the #1 state in New York for veterans population. We've got roughly 14,900 veterans here in Jefferson County. In Lewis County, it's about 3,000 veterans in Lewis County.
Tonight, we'll introduce you to some of these veterans, starting with Staff Sergeant retired Christian Hughes.
I definitely miss the military. I would be the first to tell you, every day I wake up, I miss the military.
A split second can change your life. Staff Sergeant Christian Hughes joined the military right out of high school. The young 18-year-old quickly ended up at the most deployed unit in the Army, the 10th Mountain Division.
I was in high school when 9/11 happened. I wanted to be that guy on the front lines, really involved with going after the people that took the towers down. I remember being in school watching that and just the anger like everybody had. I got to drum in December, and by January my bags were in a Connex and I was headed to Afghanistan. So I was less than 3 months out of basic training and I was already on the ground in the fight in Afghanistan. So it didn't take long before I was there. So it was intense, to say the least.
Overseas for 15 months, this was what he dreamed of. And just a year after returning home, he was on a plane back to Afghanistan, this time fighting a much deadlier war as a non-commissioned officer.
IEDs were the primary method of engagement with us. One of our first major engagements, we lost 6 guys right out of the gate.
And his life changed forever on October 2nd, 2009.
An Afghan police officer who we had been training, who we had been teaching tactics, teaching how to fight for his country and defend his country and rid his country of these terrorists, wasn't on our team like we thought he was. He engaged us at close quarters with an AK-47. I was shot 4 times, twice in each leg. My captain was shot several times. Another one of our guys was shot several times. They both lived, and then we also lost 2 soldiers. They were both shot and killed at that same time. I was bleeding a lot. My leg was mangled. My femur was shattered. I was missing 4.5 inches of femur. It just completely opened my thigh up. So they had to stabilize all that. I was flown to Bagram Air Base, where the hospital is, and basically put into a medical-induced coma. They knocked me out, basically. Flew me to Ramstein, Germany, stabilized me, and then eventually flew me back to Walter Reed, where I spent about the next year and a half at Walter Reed. Take for granted being able to walk. It's like a simple task you just do. We do it every day, right? It's a simple task. It's not so simple when you have to retrain your brain, you know, as a young adult to, hey, 1 foot in front of the other, so I have to walk again. But it was just a progression. I went from not being able to get out of a hospital bed to a wheelchair to crutches to a cane to kind of finally being able to walk again, and then thank God eventually able to run.
Christian had to say goodbye to the Army, but found a new way to serve his country. Now a sheriff deputy, his battle buddy is a K-9 named Lafferty.
It's the best job in the world. Barring being in the military and being back in the infantry, I think it's the best job. As a civilian, it's the best job in the world. I love having the dog. The things we get to do to continue to serve every day is definitely something that I try to live by.
But he can't help but remember those who didn't make it out of Afghanistan.
With everything that happened to me, that was tough, but I think what was probably the hardest thing to deal with is guys didn't come home. I was responsible for these guys. They didn't come home, they didn't make it. So then there's definitely the survivor's guilt. There's the, you know, why them and not me? Why did I survive and they didn't? You know, what could we have done different? But again, you can't Monday morning quarterback something that happens in a split second. So I think the most important thing we can do is to honor their memory, honor their sacrifice, and regardless of what happened overseas, we fought for our country, we did our job, and now we just have to honor them.
Thank you, Christian, for sharing your inspirational story. We'll be back after the break with more Veterans Voices.
Welcome back to ABC50's Veterans Voices. Before the break, we introduced you to some local veterans here in the North Country. And now you'll meet Colonel Jackson, Fort Drum's only female brigade commander. She's using this position to empower other female soldiers on the base.
So the way that I look at myself, I don't look at myself as a female brigade commander. I look at myself as a brigade commander that just happens to be a female, right?
Clearing a spot at the table, Colonel Phenicia Jackson is the commander of the 10th Mountain Division's Sustainment Brigade, a part of the 15% of female soldiers in the Army.
I get just as much support from my peers as anyone else. And I know when I get at the table, I come to the table with recommendations. It's heard. It's not just heard by my peers, but by the leadership as well. So it feels good because when I do bring a different perspective, especially if it's really related to something women-related, female-related, it's like a light bulb comes on because no one has thought of that.
But it wasn't always this way.
When I first came into the Army and I was a company commander, the Army wasn't really lenient with women and childbirth and being parents. You really had to make some hard decisions to either get out or stay. And what did that mean if you stayed in the military and you had to depart from your child to go on a deployment or something like that? They suffer in silence, and a lot of leaders can't relate to them because, again, 85% of the population consists of male soldiers and only 15% consist of female.
Just some of the many challenges female soldiers face. But for Colonel Jackson, she overcame many battles. Through half a dozen combat and operational deployments, she climbed from a private to a colonel and is leading a program on Fort Drum called Woman Warriors of the Mountain.
For the past 28 years that I've served, I've never had a woman mentor, right? I've never seen men and women leaders coming up throughout the military. So I thought to myself, it's my obligation, it's my duty to provide myself as a role model, as an advisor. The goal is to inspire, right? The goal is to inspire women that they can still serve in the military and live their life also. They can still be parents, they can still be spouses, they can still have a career. And whether it's in the military or in the civilian community, but you matter. You can do it all. There are resources and agencies that are out there. You have a support group to do whatever it is that you desire in life.
Because she knows how a support system can help one continue to climb.
I was the first one to graduate from college in my family, so that was a really big deal. I enlisted first, and I received a scholarship from the Army. And when I got commissioned, and the number of family members that showed up to my commission that told me that it was a big deal. Right, this is a big deal. And I didn't realize it at that time that I was the first member of my family to graduate college. So as I enjoy my time in the military and perform my duties, I wear this uniform for me and my family. Like every day that I come to work, it's for me and my family. Like this is a picture of my brother. He's deceased now, but I wear this uniform for my family.
And she says she's honored to be a leader today as progress continues to grow.
We have women in field artillery, we have women in aviation, women in military intelligence, logistics, medical. We have more women now. And I think I'm seeing leaders look and promote people based on talent, regardless of gender. The Army is more accommodating of women and their lifestyles if they choose to be mothers and parents as well as soldiers. Now we have policies and programs in place to protect them. That's why it's important to highlight women, support women, to encourage them to stay around, to continue their careers in the military, because we have to start now investing in those leaders that we want to see in the seats years from now.
A mission she'll continue to lead until there's room for everyone at the table.
I just want to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake, everyone gets a fair opportunity, and what they decide to do with those opportunities is up to them. But that's my job to ensure that regardless of gender, regardless of race, ethnicity, everyone gets an opportunity. At the end of the day, when I go home, it makes me proud to say that's why I've served. That's why I continue to do this after 28 years of service, because I want to be a shoulder for them to stand on.
Thank you, Colonel Jackson. Now we're heading to St. Lawrence County to introduce you to Sgt First Class Rodney Chase.
When did it really begin? Well, honestly, when I was a little boy, I was probably 5 years old, and we were taking my uncle to the airport for Vietnam.
A dream that started on a farm in St. Lawrence County. At 20 years old, Rodney Chase joined the military, enlisting in the New York National Guard in Ogdensburg, which sent him all over the world.
People think, being in National Guard, you don't go anywhere. Well, that's not true. I not only have been on state active duty throughout New York State. We were involved in Chipper 99 when the tornado hit Syracuse. Search for Hardy Allen, I was involved in that. And then we did 2 operations with the German Army in Germany. And then we did an operation in Thailand called Operation Cobra Gold. We served with them, hand in hand, side by side.
Quickly learning the hardships of the military.
My first deployment was a hard one. It was in 2004 in Iraq. We're constantly doing missions, and you never knew what was going to happen. And but just the fact of being away from home, being away from your loved ones, it's hard on anybody.
But this didn't stop Sergeant First Class Chase.
I had a guy that was in the National Guards told me when I met that first 10-year mark, he said, "So you're at the top of the hill," because I was thinking about getting out then. He said, "You're at the top of the hill." He said, "Think of it, you're on a downslope now, down to 20 years." And I thought at 20 years I was done.
Which is not what happened. He just got home from his 3rd deployment, where he led new soldiers through these same struggles. His wife back home making it a little easier, leading the St. Lawrence County Youth Bureau and sending care packages.
That helped a lot of people. Being gone away from home for so long, and then, you're like 4 or 5 months into your tour, and something as simple as a taste of home really helps.
When he's not overseas, Chase is a diesel mechanic at Fort Drum. He makes his everyday work just as impactful, as he knows he's doing it for his people.
Whenever I sign my name to anything, I always want to make sure I put myself in that vehicle. Do I want to drive that vehicle? I always make sure my job is done correctly. Learning values and standing behind what you believe and being held accountable for what you do.
But now he's getting ready to retire. As uncertainty continues to rise and violence threatens different parts of the world, Rodney says families must continue to support their soldiers, like his loved ones were there for him.
Stand behind your soldier. Never falter. Always be there for them. And always have positive vibes for them.
Because he knows that a childhood dream can lead to a future of service.
It's my honor to serve in the military. Unfortunately, I have to say goodbye to the military. It's probably going to be one of the hardest things for me to do because I've done it for almost 40 years. The prestige and the honor to serve in the military that's what made it for me right there.
Thank you again to Rodney and Alexa for hosting us. We'll have more Veterans Voices after the break. Welcome back to ABC50's Veterans Voices. I'm Isabella Colello. Now, many of us are familiar with the modern-day 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, but coming up next is a veteran who was stationed here right when the 10th Mountain was reactivated over 3 decades ago.
They had this brand new mountain division that they were starting up in the mountains of New York. I was like, sounds good. Sounds like something for me.
Sergeant First Class retired David Pavey has called the 10th Mountain Division home since its 2nd beginning, arriving to Fort Drum just after its reactivation in 1987.
Probably the first 6 months that we were up here, we were in the field about 150 some days.
Preparing him for several rotations to Panama and Germany. But it wasn't until Somalia when he saw what war was like.
We didn't fully know the mission of what was going on. We were told that it was a humanitarian mission.
Not humanitarian for long. Many know the Black Hawk Down incident during the Battle of Mogadishu, but not all know that the 10th Mountain Division was heavily involved, happening when Sergeant First Class Pavey was on the ground in Somalia.
What a lot of people don't know about Mogadishu is that that was one incident of many that happened prior to that. What you ended up really seeing as the mount operations on a big scale with like the 10th Mountain. You would go through the whole city, you coordinate it off. We put concertina wire, our engineers, completely around this city so that people could not get in or out. And you went door to door searching the houses, and you were searching for weapons or anybody that we knew were definitely part of the militants. Everybody that you're hearing about in the news right now, they were in Somalia. And that's what drove the different factions that were fighting in Somalia.
Seeing the army change before him.
Between Somalia as a whole and Mogadishu, the army sat back and re-looked at the way we did things, which centered around the urban terrain. And so policy was completely reformed after Somalia in the way we did things, in the way we trained. And we've seen a big shift towards the operations in urban terrain or operating in the cities.
This was one of the many missions Pavey served. He left Fort Drum in the late 1990s and continued to serve around the world, only to return to Fort Drum nearly a decade later and further prove his leadership capabilities.
I was asked by the Division Sergeant Major at the time to go over to the aviation unit and start up a Pathfinder unit. That was the first time they'd ever had a Pathfinder unit here at Fort Drum. And our sole purpose was working under the Personnel Recovery Agency. People get lost, people kidnapped, helicopters crash, whatever. We were the ones that were to go out and rescue them.
Deploying to Afghanistan with the Combat Aviation Brigade in 2008.
Everything we did was by aircraft. We had designated aircraft. We worked 48 hours on, 48 hours off. From October 8 to October 2009, we were the only thing going on at that time. A lot of the units that were the only way they got around was by the up-armored vehicles. They'd only try to go into certain areas so many times, and they'd counter IEDs and whatnot. They were not going into that area anymore. But helicopters and jets flying over in those areas kept seeing stuff that was going on. And that was also the first time we ran into Iranian drones. We had an F-16 shot down an Iranian drone, and it was my unit that went and picked that up.
Earning Bronze Stars for successful missions. Like many veterans, Dave has endless stories about his time with 10th Mountain, which helps him today in his role as Jefferson County's Director of Veteran Services.
It's all about helping the community, and the veterans are a big part of this community. It's my chance to give back to the community, to the veterans, who, if it wasn't for veterans and the active duty, who knows if we would be here right now, sitting here like this, having this conversation.
And continues to remind soldiers of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunities in the North Country.
Having the mentorship, and as I grew up through the military, having the right leaders to show me what I needed to do, I think that's a big part of why now I want to give back to not only the veterans, but I try to also give back to the active duty soldiers that are on post. Being a veteran is, I think it's something you owe the country.
Thank you, Dave, for sharing your story. Coming up after the break, a very special message from 10th Mountain Division Commanding General Gregory Anderson. Welcome back to ABC50's Veterans Voices. Throughout the night, we've heard stories from local veterans here in the community.
If it wasn't for veterans and the active duty, who knows if we would be here right now, sitting here like this, having this conversation. Being a veteran is, I think it's something you owe the country.
I definitely miss the military. I would be the first to tell you, every day I wake up I miss the military. To continue to serve every day is definitely something that I try to live by.
Unfortunately, I have to say goodbye to the military. It's probably going to be one of the hardest things for me to do. The prestige and the honor to serve in the military that's what made it for me right there.
I just want to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake, everyone gets a fair opportunity, and what they decide to do with those opportunities is up to them. But that's my job to ensure that regardless of gender, regardless of race, ethnicity, everyone gets an opportunity. At the end of the day, when I go home, it makes me proud to say that's why I've served. That's why I continue to do this after 28 years of service, because I want to be a shoulder for them to stand on.
But before we close our show, we have a very special message from 10th Mountain Division Commanding General Gregory Anderson.
Hey, the North Country, Fort Drum, Major General Greg Anderson coming to you from Constanta at MK Air Base on the Black Sea in Romania, where I'd like to wish everyone a happy Veterans Day. The day where we honor the men and women who have stepped up, come forward to defend our nation, our way of life, and our people throughout our history. Their sacrifices will never be forgotten, and we must honor and thank them for it, and I'm happy to do so today. To all our veterans, thank you.
General Anderson, we could not agree more. Thank you to all the veterans and service members here in the North Country for everything you do for our community and our country. Have a good night.
To watch any of these stories shared tonight about our local veterans, head to our website, informnny.com.